Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about my self-delusion and some self-delusion I've seen in others. And if there's time, networking. Anyway, self-delusion. I was watching a tail end of an Oprah episode. It was on YouTube, but it was a piece of it. And there was this group of 35, 36, 37-year-old women who were unmarried. And this is what I find irritating on a personal level. They were all fabulous, which I don't quite understand why they have to keep saying that, but they did. And they went, chatted with them, etc. And yeah, most of them, I think they all were actually professional women, meaning high-paying jobs. Some of them obviously high time demand jobs as well. And a lot of them had put off dating or even meeting the seriousness of looking for a husband until they had hit into their 30s. I don't think there's any seriousness prior to that. A couple of them had mentioned that they had turned down marriage proposals in their past. What struck me as the only one I actually thought was interesting, and she was a little plump, but she seemed really nice, but she had a list of attributes she wanted in a husband, and it was like 100 things long, over 6 feet tall, making over, I believe, 100,000, might have been 150,000. So it gives you a rough idea what she's making, because women either want to marry sideways or up, never down. And anyway, I did some rough calculations, and over 6 feet tall, single, at that age, she had to be within 5 years of her, so I believe she was 36, so someone who was no older than 41. Anyway, it was self-delusion because essentially she wanted to be rewarded for her law degree because she was a lawyer, and she wanted basically to meet somebody who was at that level. Keep stopping as people are coming by. I don't want to record anyone else. Anyway, she was self-delusional, ironically enough, because the conditions that she was placing on this, and she was not a tall woman herself. I would be quite shocked if she was over 5'5". So she had access to a good percentage of the population. Of course, the hosts, which I think were Steve Harvey and Oprah, he was the guest, or of course played it up for the comedy value. But it basically shows self-delusion, like she basically priced herself out of the market because those combination of factors, when quite frankly you're just an ordinary person, was incredibly crazy. What wasn't being said there is that if there was a guy who was 36, 38 years old, that quite frankly, he would probably date younger. And no one mentioned it, but it was alluded to in the conversations. And younger could just use 30, so not unreasonable, younger. And the panic that these women had was palpable. A couple of them in the back were extremely sad, you could see, of the group. So where's that self-delusion come from? Self things. Well, myself, it's funny how you always think of going back into the career world, and you automatically think, well, I need to make this much money, period, even though the job may have changed, like my old industry. But for some reason you think you're worth what you were at your highest paying level before. And there's other people that are doing that job now, and they are a high demand, in demand job. So you have lots of competition. So if you hold out for that, there could be heartbreak. Met a guy yesterday who, believe it or not, is an exterminator. He used to work for a large corporation that did that, management, and about a decade ago, he went and struck out on his own. Granted, there's a bit of grossness in the job that he can't stand. Ironically enough, the guy's afraid of spiders. Well, if you're poking around in dark corners, etc., putting rat traps down, you're going to come in contact with a lot of spiders. But he's literally afraid of spiders, and he can't stand the cobwebs. So I thought that was humorous. I was doing the math on what he said he did for a living, and he makes somewhere between $60,000 and $100,000 a year. Basically does residential because commercial's too competitive. There's no money in it. That's where the big corporations are. And he talked about something really interesting. He does 3 jobs a day. That's it. And his company, when they did they had a residential division, they would send some of their guys out for 15 jobs a day, which was a long day. They're probably starting at 8 in the morning and finishing up 8 or 9 at night. And that's what they were booked for. These guys had to do it. And so you're thinking to yourself, here's a guy who keeps his expenses low. He has his vehicle, basically has a bunch of traps and peanut butter and some of those enclosed traps. Does a job that no one wants, and he says it's recession proof, and there's an automatic barrier to the industry because a lot of people won't go into it. One of the sad side notes he mentioned is that their company was hiring a bunch of people that immigrated. They couldn't find work elsewhere, and some of these guys, because they all were guys, were doctors in their former country or professionals like lawyers, etc., and their credentials weren't recognized. And so I thought that was a little sad, but it just goes to show you the people had I think some of those people came to this country thinking, under self-delusion, that they'd be able to continue to be doctors. I don't think someone even asked the question. Maybe some had it with their eyes wide open, but in certain circumstances they actually have to retake all of their qualifiers, their courses and everything, which I bet you is challenging. So dose of reality. Those 36-year-old women, quite frankly, I think there was baby rabies because the babies were mentioned more than once. A couple of them were upset because no one had told them the drop in fertility that occurs or starts to occur after age 30. And they seemed quite surprised by it. Some of them were freezing eggs, etc. Back to the careers over 6 figures. That's where the tie-in comes in. So here's somebody who wants to look for a job. Me, who always thinks that maybe I'll get out of my business, do corporate, more 9 to 5. Quite frankly, all the systems will be set up so I don't have to do all the bookkeeping and everything myself, because quite frankly it's distracting, and just focus on what I need to do. Only problem is I have memories of over 20 years in corporate working with people that quite frankly I didn't really like that much. I was friendly with them, but none of them were friends. None of them I felt compelled to even follow up with once after I left. So, but here's the thing. How do I correct myself, the self-delusion, or the women in this case as well? Well, obviously networking. First of all, the women are of an age where it's probably too late to go to the clubs, because 1, they're tired because they work a lot. 2, clubs don't work anyway, even if you're young, like they used to. So that leaves you with internet dating, which no one seems to like. And the third, and which works for both, is just network. And trying to remember if I mentioned this in a previous video blog. But I have to say, just getting out of networking with the understanding that most of the stuff, nothing will come of it. But then every once in a while, you'll meet somebody, and then 2 years later, you keep up, follow up, see them at other events, and 2 years later, suddenly an opportunity shows up. And I've seen these guys who have this ability. I've distinctly remember my corporate days going out to lunch with this one guy I barely knew, friendly, and it took us 30 minutes to walk to the lunch place because he met that many people he knew and he kept in touch with. And this guy would show up late for work. He would leave on time. He would sometimes leave during the day. It was always a big joke. But he was forgiven because he just knew everyone in the industry. And so he'd be the go-to guy, and all he was literally doing was being friendly and keeping in touch. And what brings this up is, I remember I just stuck to my LinkedIn email you get every day, people you may know, etc. And there's this guy at my alumni networking group whose name popped up. And, he writes a blog. He's on Twitter. Well, he's actually in the accounting field, so not quite sure what he Twitters about. I think it's all accounting related. Very much of a niche there. And he goes to events, but the guy knows everyone, and he's a dry personality. Definitely an introvert who's made the life decision to be an extrovert. So if anyone is going to be able to bounce back from a lost job, it would be him. He just has so much to draw on, so many resources because he reaches out all the time. And that's kind of the way it has to be for those women and myself if I was looking for another corporate job. You just got to get out there. I still understand that most people probably looking for a relationship aren't in the bars or even online. And most of the jobs where there's not much competition are not posted. They're internal, or they're done on industry sites or even searches versus a posting. I know from my perspective is a lot of internal jobs, person's already been chosen internally, but they're required to post outside as policy. So what they do is they change the conditions of the job to reflect their internal candidate, to sort of give them a lock. Anyway, I'm digressing here. I think I am going to self-promote more by way of networking to increase my options. This will be to improve my business, but ultimately it'll also be to increase my life opportunities. That's it.